Welcome back to Twisted Flashes, a flash fiction anthology podcast of twisted tales, where each story is less than 1,000 words. I'm Michael Reynolds, and let's get started with today's tale. The Exorcism. The floorboards creaked beneath Father Anderson's feet as he made his way down the narrow hallway, his weathered leather bag heavy with the tools of his grim trade. Night pressed against the windows of the Victorian home, and even through his cassock he could feel the unnatural chill that permeated the air. The rosary wrapped around his fingers clicked softly with each step, a quiet counterpoint to the muffled sounds coming from behind the bedroom door at the end of the hall. Mrs. Sullivan, the mother, stood waiting for him, her face drawn and pale in the dim light of the wall sconces. Dark circles beneath her eyes spoke of sleepless nights spent listening to her daughter's affliction. "She's gotten worse, Father," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Margaret hasn't been herself for days now. The things she says, the things she knows." Father Anderson nodded solemnly, his lined face betraying no emotion despite this familiar dread settling in his stomach. After 30 years of serving the church, he knew better than most that evil wore many faces, but it was the eyes that always gave it away. He'd seen those eyes too many times, black pools of ancient malice, staring out from otherwise innocent faces. "Has she responded to the blessed water?" he asked, already knowing the answer from the way Mrs. Sullivan's shoulders slumped. It it burned her, Father. She screamed like I've never heard before. That's when I knew for certain it wasn't my Margaret anymore." Father Anderson placed a steadying hand on Mrs. Sullivan's shoulder. "Stay here," he instructed quietly. "No matter what you hear, do not enter until I call for you." He waited for her shaky nod before turning to face the door, clutching his crucifix with practiced resolve. The bedroom air was thick with the acrid stench of sulfur and decay. Margaret lay contorted on the bed, her limbs twisted at unnatural angles, her once golden hair matted with sweat against her ghostly pale skin. At the sight of the priest, her head snapped toward him with inhuman speed, and a smile spread across her face. Too wide, too many teeth. "Anderson," she said, but it wasn't Margaret's voice. The sound was somewhere between honey and gravel, ancient and hollow. "Still fighting his battle? How many souls have you failed to save?" The priest set his bag down deliberately, removing his ritual items with methodical precision. "I know what you are," he replied, his voice steady despite the malevolent energy that seemed to pulse through the room. "And I know you have no claim to this child." The thing wearing Margaret's face laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Her body began to rise from the bed, hovering several inches above the mattress. "Don't I? She invited me in, Anderson. Such sweet despair she had, such delicious guilt. All those dark thoughts about her father's death, she practically begged me for my company." Father Anderson began the ritual, his Latin phrases cutting through the heavy air. "Exorcismus te, omnis immundus spiritus." The entity screamed, Margaret's body convulsing as the holy words took effect. Objects around the room began to vibrate, and the temperature plummeted until Anderson's breath came out in white clouds. "You're too late," the demon shrieked, Margaret's voice now intertwined with something deeper, something that spoke of endless darkness. "She's mine. You'll never—" The words cut off in a gurgling howl as Father Anderson pressed the crucifix to her forehead. Hours passed in a blur of prayer and resistance. The demon fought viciously, hurling both objects and obscenities, revealing secrets that tried to shake the priest's resolve. It spoke of his past failures, of the young boy in Toledo who hadn't survived his last exorcism, of the doubts that plagued him late at night when his faith felt thinnest. Margaret's body thrashed and contorted, bones cracking as the entity within her refused to release its hold. Blood trickled from her nose and ears, and her eyes had rolled back until only the whites were visible. Father Anderson's voice grew hoarse, but he pressed on, even as sweat soaked through his clothes and his hands trembled from exhaustion. In his name, I command you to depart, he shouted, pressing forward despite the supernatural wind that howled through the room. Pictures flew from walls and furniture splintered against the ceiling. The demon's resistance reached a fever pitch. Margaret's body bent backwards until her spine seemed ready to snap, her mouth opening impossibly wide as she released a scream that shattered every window in the room. Glass rained down around them as Father Anderson made his final push, his prayers reaching a crescendo. And then suddenly silence. Still here, Father? The demon spoke through the girl at last. Father Anderson's mouth twisted into a grim smile as he set the Bible aside. Good. Come, for I am no longer afraid. In the name of thy Father, and the darkness, and every unholiness under the sky, and in the land, and in the depths of the ground below, I command thee to enter into me, that I may behold and partake in your glory and your power forever after. Then a low, guttural laugh echoed in the room, but it didn't come from Margaret. You can come in now, Mrs. Sullivan. We hope you enjoyed our tale today. I'm Michael Reynolds, host and narrator, and the author of today's story. If you'd like to support our podcasts and get access to exclusive Patreon-only episodes, be sure to support us at patreon.com/fallendestiny for as little as $1 per month. Twisted Flashes is a production of Fallen Destiny Studios.